Welcome everyone to Washington County's Safe Rest Village at Cornelius on 4th Avenue. This is a neighborhood plan meeting. Next slide, please. My name is Ty Schwafferman. I work with Office of Equity Inclusion, Community Engagement, and Housing Services, and I provide support to the team to engage the community and our advisory and general policy engagement as well. Welcome this afternoon. Before we get started, I'd like to ask that our Spanish interpreter let folks who may want to participate in this event in Spanish to make an announcement. So I'll invite Victor.
Thank you, Ty. I'll give the instructions in Spanish first, and then I'll give them in English as well. Muy buenos días o buenas tardes a todos. Muy bienvenidos a esta junta. Tenemos interpretación disponible en español. Si está ingresando por medio de una computadora, va a haber un icono de globo con la palabra interpretación en la parte baja de su pantalla, como aparece aquí en la pantalla con el ejemplo. De ahí puede seleccionar las opciones de inglés y español. O si está ingresando por un dispositivo móvil, van a haber 3 puntos con la palabra más, de ahí interpretación de idiomas, y puede seleccionar nuevamente los idiomas de preferencia. Así que si desea escuchar en inglés, por favor seleccione inglés, o si quiere en español, seleccione el español. Si tiene algún...
So at this time, if you would like to go ahead and select your preference, English or Spanish, on the interpreter button as seen on the screen. Today, to participate, we will have some options. This is a hybrid meeting. So for folks that are in the room, I encourage you to raise your hand and we'll have time for a question and answer period, and someone will come to you with a microphone. We do have a short presentation before we enter into the question and answer phase. So if you're willing to hold the questions, then we can get to questions a little later in the meeting. So for folks online to stay engaged in today's meeting, we would like to point you to the screen. It shows a depiction of how you can ask a question using the raise hand feature. The meeting currently has everyone on mute. And if you'd like to request to be unmuted for a question, the best way to do that is by hitting the raise hand symbol. And if you could, encourage you to, when you're not asking your question, go ahead and unmute yourself so that allows everyone to be able to hear the participation and the presentations of the meeting. Next slide, please. Thank you. Before I get to our ground rules for the meeting, one more quick note. We want to recognize that barriers to engagement that do exclude communities of color and other marginalized communities from participating in our decision-making process, and to acknowledge the unique and invaluable lived experience of immigrants, people of color, and historically excluded community members. If you have any needs and ways that we can accommodate your participation today, we would like to support that in the meeting. So please just message one of the co-hosts and we'll try to support you. Now to our ground rules. I want to encourage to maintain a meeting where everyone participates. We just follow these ground rules. So respectful listening. Try not to interrupt others. No personalized attacks. If you have specific issues about our program or our other services, please direct it towards those. We want to encourage everyone to participate. This is a small enough group where we can probably answer everyone's questions today. And we want to be patient. If we do have a number of questions, that we will get to your question or comment or anything that you'd like to share during the meeting. Stay open-minded, and then also remain positive. Next slide, please.
Hi, could we pause the presentation for just a moment and stop sharing so that I can set my Teams to do not disturb so that the messages don't show up on the screen.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, thank you.
And while we are resetting the presentation, it doesn't hurt to just cover that today's topic, for folks maybe who joined just a few minutes after my first slide, that today's topic for the presentation is our Safe Rest Village in Cornelius. And the primary topic is the neighborhood plan. So we'll be sharing that with the community for the first time today and engaging in a conversation about that and your feedback. So thank you. So this is a slide covering our timeline for community engagement for the Cornelius Safe Rest Village. Today's primary objective is reviewing the neighborhood plan, which will be posted on the website after this meeting for additional feedback. The final version will be posted on our website. And our timeline shows a little clipboard in the middle there. That's where we're focusing on today's meeting. And we will have several more steps of engagement in the future, including engaging nearby neighbors and notifying of the shelter's opening, and the sessions 3 to 6 months after the shelter's opening. Next slide. So to cover the agenda for today's meeting, we will be talking about the neighborhood plan. We'll also be sharing that on our website, and then those postcards will be sent out at the opening of the site. So all of this is going to be discussed in more detail today, but first I'd like to introduce Jess Larson, our Assistant Director of our Homeless Services, for a little intro on the project. Thank you. And Jess Larson just had to unmute herself, so I just wanted to do the introduction one more time. Jess Larson, our Assistant Director of Homeless Services. Thank you.
Thank you, Ty. I'm sorry for the delay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jess Larson. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm our Assistant Director in the Department of Housing Services. Glad to be with you today. My role is just to give you a brief overview of the work that's led up to the conversation we're eager to have with you all today, which is really about the proposed neighborhood plan, as Ty described. But before we get there, let me describe a little bit of the work that's come before. Next slide, please. So we began notifying the community as soon as it was determined that the location on 4th in Cornelius would be a suitable location to create a temporary shelter program. That notification went out by a postcard in late May, and that led into and that postcard described an invitation to a virtual meeting, which happened at the end of June. And then later, just a couple weeks ago, we reconvened again for a neighborhood plan workshop where community members could provide feedback on what the concerns were for around safety and livability and the shelter program operations, so that the partners in the project, Open Door and the county, could work together to draft this proposed plan. I do want to say before we move to the next slide that it is true that we did not engage the community on the question of deciding if this was a suitable location for shelter. We understand that that causes concern and frustration, and we were eager to talk with the community as soon as we learned that this would be a suitable site for a temporary shelter program. It is part of our practice as a county when trying to create new shelters, that we use our community guidelines to determine if potential locations meet the agreed upon standards and expectations of a potential shelter location, and then seek any available landlord or property that would potentially be available for a temporary shelter program. And all of that work is done with staff and real estate and partners without community engagement until a location is determined. So now that this location has been determined, and we have had the initial conversations with our community, we are ready to bring forward this draft neighborhood plan and seek further feedback from the community to ensure that we are doing all that we can do to address the concerns. Next slide, please. Okay, so as I was describing, that neighborhood plan, or the neighborhood plan you're going to hear more about shortly, was developed through the conversations that we've had with the community through these different engagement sessions and other stakeholder conversations throughout those last several months. And also in conjunction with practices we use in our shelter programs to ensure the best outcomes in service, meaning the best shelter care that we can provide, and also the best partnership we can provide with the surrounding community. Essentially, the purpose of the neighborhood plan is to describe the commitment we are making, we the partners on the project are making to the surrounding community, so that the community knows our agreements around how we will commit to offering a safe shelter program that is respectful of the surrounding neighbors and contributes to the neighborhood community. We also want to share that it's a document we expect to keep updating as we learn more in the practice of as we learn more when the shelter opens and we get more feedback from the community. It's something we can keep updating and improving so those commitments get clearer and more effective in time. Next slide. But the neighborhood plan can't solve all concerns and all and can't be responsive to every piece of feedback we've received. Some feedback we've received we're not able to take action on. For example, one of the pieces of feedback we heard was a request for a 12-foot fence. That's just not going to be accepted by city code. And so we work instead to address the nature of that feedback, which is we want to make sure that fence is looks good in the neighborhood, that it's tall enough to provide security and privacy for the neighborhood, and that we talk with the surrounding neighbors about where that fence goes, so that's responsive to both those livability and safety concerns. So that is just one example of some limitations of the neighborhood plan. It can't be responsive to all of the exact feedback we received, but our intention is to be responsive to the nature of the feedback we've received. Next slide. So in general, these are the commitments that Washington County and our service provider, Open Door, are committed to you, the neighbors, at the future shelter location in Cornelius. We will maintain a peaceful, safe, and clean neighborhood through the program operations. We will ensure open and honest bilingual communication with the neighbors and surrounding community. We will help each other address concerns and solve problems as they arise. We aim to provide a public service that is a benefit for the whole community, both those who are in the shelter and the neighbors around. We will maintain respect for others and their property. And we will partner to sustain livability and economic environment in the neighborhood. So I think that's the end of my brief introduction. Next slide. And excellent. Now I can hand it over to my colleague, Jesse Adams, and our partner, Jeremy Taves and John McPherson, who will describe the specifics of the proposed and draft neighborhood plan. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Jess. I am Jesse Adams. I work on the homeless services team at the county, and I am here today with Jeremy and John to talk through the draft neighborhood plan. I'll go through each section and talk about the concerns we heard from you all, as well as ideas you proposed to address those concerns. And then John and Jeremy will talk about how those are incorporated into the neighborhood plan specifically for the Cornelius site. So next slide, please. So the first section we're going to talk about are the safety concerns we heard from all of you. And the first one's listed there. These are not exhaustive. These are kind of the main ones we heard from you all. And we sourced these from the feedback posters at the workshop we held on July 11th. So the main feedback we heard about safety was who to contact with concerns to ensure there's enough staff on site to address the safety of the children at the nearby bus stop and concerns around criminal behaviors on site. Ideas you all had was to ensure that there was a minimum number of staff on site, that there are no drugs and alcohol allowed, no weapons allowed, and that any pets in the shelter will be kept on leashes and looked after. One thing I wanted to mention that we heard a lot, as Jess said, the neighborhood plan cannot address all of the concerns. So one concern we heard here was about the low barrier shelter and the lack of background checks. I did want to say that low barrier shelter is something that is nationwide sheltering best practice to ensure that those who are outside have few barriers to come inside and work on a housing plan to obtain permanent housing. So we do partner with community corrections and the justice system to ensure that anybody who does have that need is maintaining their contact with their parole and probation officers and maintaining the rules that they are supposed to follow, but we do not do background checks before they come into the shelter. So to address the safety concerns, we've added things into the neighborhood plan, specifically a code of conduct, and I'm going to pass it over to John and Jeremy to talk through the code of conduct and what that will look like. They might need help unmuting, Ty.
There we go. Thank you, Jesse. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Jeremy Taves. I am the executive director for Open Door. I essentially oversee all of Open Door's community services that we provide. And then also we have John McPherson here. He is our program manager of shelter services that will help to oversee the operations of the Cornelius Safe Rest Village on 4th Avenue. And so I'm going to go over our code of conduct. The one of the things that I do want to iterate is this is a low barrier shelter program, but at the same time, it is a structured housing program. We have a lot of different policies and procedures in place to make sure that our program runs efficiently, effectively, and safely for the community. And part of that is written into our code of conduct, which is a live document which we will have available for anyone to see at any time on our website. And part of our code of conduct is this is a document that all residents review with staff. They sit down and go over, and they also sign it to adhere to this code of conduct. So it's something that we take very seriously and make sure that everyone involved in our program is aware of that. That is both staff, participants, volunteers that come onto site. So part of that is we do not tolerate any illegal behaviors. As mentioned before, there are no drugs or alcohol allowed on site. And I know that some people have mentioned concerns. Well, what about if they leave the shelter location and do drugs or alcohol off site? If it's within a certain amount of area, that is not going to be tolerated, and that's kind of written into our code of conduct as well. We don't allow any weapons on site either. It's a safe zone. No illegal parking of vehicles, including bicycles, and with the Cornelius site, there actually is no parking allowed for any vehicles. And so there should not be any vehicles on site other than the bikes that participants would have within the shelter location next to their pods or in the designated bike rack. There's also no loitering or panhandling in and around the area or camping. That also goes in accordance with the time, place, and manner that's going to be put in place. So anyone that is seen to be panhandling, we will address that and make sure that it's taken care of in a timely manner. And then all meals provided at shelter site must stay in the shelter site, as well as all services provided are for residents of that location. One of the things we mentioned is, what if someone that is not part of the program comes and visits the shelter? Our staff, as well as other staff within Open Door, whether it be our outreach team or our case management team, would come on site to pick that person up and bring them to our access center location that is in a different location within Cornelius. So that person can also receive services they need to navigate the care that they need. Next slide. And then ongoing, one of the things that we have implemented is a curfew. So I know it's listed as quiet hours. So we have a curfew from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. That is all participants that are part of the program need to be checked into the site between those hours. The only exception is if they have a nighttime job, which we know that ahead of time, which obviously they would be offsite at their job location. We also heard from some feedback that we wanted to initiate quiet hours between 8 p.m. and 10 p.m. so that anyone that is trying to get some rest that's neighboring will make sure that the site is kept under quiet hours starting at 8 p.m. All pets are kept on leashes, and actually there'll be a grassy pad. It's kind of an artificial grass pad that is caters to pets, that pets will be able to relieve themselves and be able to be on site to I guess relieve themselves, and we'll clean up on site. Occasionally there'll be some participants that might take their pets on walk, but it would be towards the main highway, kind of along Walmart. Participants who violate our code, we do address this on a case-by-case basis, but they will be appropriate consequences based on the circumstances will be handled by staff on our on-site management and our program manager, as well as myself. And then all participants suspended from our program, if it's deemed necessary, will receive other appropriate services so they can move on to other programs outside of this particular program. And then I hand this back over to Jesse.
So in order to help promote safety and security and be able to enforce the code of conduct that Jeremy just went through, some other things will be a minimum of 2 shelter staff on site 24/7, and that includes overnight. There are more than 2 staff scheduled for every shift. So Jeremy and Open Door plan for people to call in sick and things like that, so that there is always a minimum of 2 shelter staff. There will also be a phone line available 24/7 to address community issues. So you'll always be able to call and talk to a staff about any questions or concerns you may have. All calls and resolutions will be documented, and that phone number will be made available on websites, also through mailings to the surrounding community, and I believe on a sign outside the shelter, if that's correct, Jeremy. Yes, I see him nodding. So yes, there will be a sign outside with the number as well. And all of that will be, any mailings to the community will be bilingual as well. Next slide, which I think goes back to Jeremy.
This one's actually for me. My name is John McPherson, and I'm the program manager for Open Doors Shelter Services. So to begin with, we are working diligently to make sure that we have policies and procedures in place to make sure that the community is safe, that the pods are safe, and that our residents and community members are taken care of and safe. And that's an extremely important part of what we want to do with this shelter. If there are any concerns expressed by neighbors, you will have the number to call, and then we will attempt to get that done as quickly as possible through our own investigation and provide feedback on what we did to resolve those issues for our neighbors. We also have our outreach team. We're establishing an outreach team for shelter services that can engage with neighbors, the sheriff's office, and nearby businesses. Part of their job is going to make sure that everyone is getting their needs met, making sure that there aren't any ongoing issues, and if there are any ongoing issues, that they are there to help solve those problems. So for instance, camping. If we have a resident that's camping and it's a little further away from where our shelter is, then those within a certain radius, we should be able to go out and help with that. We're going to have shelter staff within eye line of the school bus stop at all the pickups and drop-offs for children. This was, I know, a concern that was expressed almost every meeting and every conversation that I've had with all of you as I went around the neighborhood. I don't think there was a single person that didn't mention this. And so we do want to make sure that we take this extremely seriously, and as a father myself, I would want that to be taken seriously as well. So we're going to always have staff there to make sure that we are in eye line of that bus stop when we're doing pickups and drop-offs. And then we'll be contacting the sheriff's office, mental health crisis response team, and fire department for any and all emergencies that would require their that require their assistance. And that's something that I know that as we were in Hillsborough, we had a really great working relationship with HPD, and any issues that came up, they were extremely helpful, and so was the crisis team. Next slide, please.
So the next section of the plan talks about shelter design concerns. So we heard repeatedly from you all about fencing around the site and ensuring that garbage and hygiene services are managed, that there is lighting and a gate that closes. Some ideas you all had was to ensure that the fence was tall and something other than chain link, and that parking was inside the shelter fencing, so that the entire site was surrounded by that fence. So to talk through the site plan, I'm going to pass it back over to John and Jeremy. This is an updated photo of the site plan. It's slightly different than the one we had on the wall during our feedback meeting. So John and Jeremy will give an overview right now, but if you would like to see it again during the question and answer period, just let us know and we can go back to it.
Thank you, Jesse. Yes, and the site was redone. I think that just shows that we were listening to the community, and then based on feedback, we redesigned the site to accommodate some of the concerns that our neighbors had, specifically the ones that are to the west property line. They're going to be direct neighbors. And so on that side, we do have a 20-foot setback on the fence line, which is highlighted in orange. And then we also pushed back the fence line off of the main road. And then all services are contained within the fenced area of the Safe Breast Village. We have a dining tent area, which is right there in the middle. We have showers and bathrooms towards the front. And then obviously our office locations, as well as storage, is near the front, so we can be doing check-in and check-outs for participants that are coming and going. And then there is a smoking area, designated smoking area, that's located within the boundaries of the shelter. And that's actually where the pet area is located as well. And then we have our garbage and recycling, which is right off of the main entrance for waste management to be able to have easy access to pick up recycling and waste management. So as mentioned before, Washington County does have a 7-foot limitation on the fence, but within the city limits of Cornelius, we can go up to 6 feet high, and that's just adhering to the codes within the city of Cornelius. Lighting, we will have overhead lighting that will be on from dusk until about 10 p.m. And then at that point in time, nighttime lighting, which is going to be lower lighting, that's not going to be visible to the community, just for folks that are, would be getting up in the middle of the night that need to be able to use the restroom. They'll be able to have a safe walking path to get there. And that was just feedback we heard from one of the residents so that we're not having lights illuminating through the entire community at all hours. So we'll have some nighttime lighting as well.
All right, so this next section of the plan addresses neighborhood appearance concerns. So the concerns we heard consistently from you all were the appearance of shelter impacting property values and encampments forming near the shelter, And some ideas from you all was that Open Door would maintain the area outside the shelter as well as inside of the shelter fence, and asked repeatedly about the mowing of the vacant area that is right outside the fencing surrounding the shelter. One, I wanted to go back to what Jess Larson was talking about at the beginning, and that a neighborhood plan is unable to address every concern. And one of the concerns we did hear a lot about was lost property values. We can't address that specifically in the plan because the property values are made up of a lot of market forces that we can't entirely control. So what we wrote into the plan was the things that we can control, like the appearance of the site and working with the city of Cornelius to add sidewalks and to improve walkability. So I'm going to again pass it back to John and Jeremy to talk through the specifics of the neighborhood appearance section.
So for our role in this, what we really wanted to do is make sure that we are keeping things not in just good condition, but the way I would like to do it is potentially leave it better than when we got there. And essentially our shelter staff will be conducting daily walkarounds. They'll be checking the area for garbage or unauthorized campers, and making sure that we're as a staff cleaning up and making sure that the unauthorized campers receive the services that they need from other locations, including our access center. We also have a program going into effect where we have residents that will also be helping with upkeep and having their own chores to do. So they'll also be engaged in helping keep the area clean. If there are unauthorized campers, our outreach team is supposed to be going out and getting contacting them and getting them the help that they need. And that means that they are going to be working on putting them through the system and getting them shelter service, or at least hooked up with access to our access center. We'll be making sure that the area around us is well lit, that the secure shelter site and grounds are clear, have all the walkways clear, and that we're going to be mowing the grass in the empty lot next to the shelter as well, and keeping everything clean and presentable.
All right, so we are on to the communication section of the plan. And the concerns we heard from you all was a lack of communication. Some of the communication contained misinformation, and that bilingual communication was vital. Community ideas you all had to improve that communication was forming a neighborhood committee, to have a Q&A on the website with the pod village information, and that communication, bilingual communication, happens through in-person meetings, through the mail, and through email, so that there's lots of access. And I'm going to again hand it back to John and Jeremy to talk through communication around incidents, and then also a neighborhood committee.
Thank you, Jesse. So I'll go over incidents and safety concerns, and I want to address something that I think was might have been misinformation or just misunderstood information, is that in the event of emergency, we all encourage everyone to call 911 immediately, especially if any imminent threats or safety concerns for you, your neighbors, and your property. That's very important to us. But at the same time, you have access to our 24-hour line. If you identify a concern that doesn't necessarily deem an emergency, feel free to give us a call, make us aware, and we will look into that. Part of our plan is to make sure that the safety of the community is held to a very high standard. So 911 is called for all emergencies and imminent threat, and shelter supervisors document and assess our safety plan. So we will document every concern that's brought to our attention. We will investigate that, and we will also provide feedback to the community on how we address those concerns. Shelter supervisors are also notified of all non-emergency incidents within 24 hours, so that as well as John McPherson, our program manager, can look into those safety concerns as well. Incidents are reviewed by the supervisor and include interviews with all persons involved and community members, so we can investigate it appropriately. And then staff contact any involved neighbors within 5 business days to share the full report and the plan. so that we can let you guys know how we addressed it, how we can get better at preventing these concerns from happening in the future, if that's at all possible, and we will make every effort to make sure that doesn't happen again. And then part of the ongoing communication that we want to have is we're working on forming a neighborhood committee. So anyone that is interested, please reach out to myself or John McPherson. We'll make that information available. One of the things that we are going to do is, especially in the very beginning operations of this program in this location, is we want to meet regularly with a handful of neighbors and community members to talk about how the Good Neighbor agreement or the supportive neighbor agreement plan is being upheld, as well as any concerns that might have been brought to our attention during our operations from meeting to meeting program. So the members of this committee would be folks from your neighborhood, likely some employer staff of Walmart, since that's a representation of the community, our program supervisors, some of our shelter staff, as well as Washington County staff would be represented in this neighborhood committee. Like I said, this committee is being formed to address things before they even become a concern. So to openly talk about how things are going, so that we can fluidly move through this and make this program operate as harmoniously as possible within the community. So in this committee, we'll review incidents and concerns as mentioned. We'll go over the neighborhood plan and any adjustments that need to be made to it. And we will also plan for bilingual communication of these changes, so that we're not having any misinformation or misunderstood information. And then opportunities to engage with shelter programming, which it's very important to us that we have feedback on how well we're operating this program in the community.
All right, so that is the end of our presentation about the draft plan. So next steps are, we're going to take the rest of the meeting today to hear questions and feedback from you all. But then the recording of this meeting, as well as the draft plan, will be posted on our website for another week to gather additional feedback for anybody who is unable to attend this meeting, or something occurs to you after this meeting and you would like to add it. You can go feel free to do that. The construction on the site is going to continue. Open Doors working with a contractor to get the site ready, and construction timelines, things happen, but right now it looks like the shelter opening is estimated for late August 2023, and we will continue to communicate that timeline if that changes. And we will send notification out to the surrounding community prior to the shelter opening that opening is coming. And then we will have a check-in meeting 3 to 6 months after that shelter opening to go look at the neighborhood plan and make sure that things are working, go over any consistent problems or concerns, and just do a general check-in. Next slide, please. Here are other ways that you can stay engaged and gather information. You can always email us any question or concern you have at that homeless services email right there. The Pod Village Shelter website that you see is where all of the information about the Cornelius shelter lives, and that's where this recording and the draft neighborhood plan are going to live as well. And then you have a YouTube channel where you can look at this recording or other recordings that we've done from our previous community engagements. And then next slide, we are ready to take any questions or feedback you all have about the neighborhood plan. And thanks for sharing your lunch hour with us.
All right. Thank you to Jesse, to Jeremy, and to John for presenting, as well as Jess. Thank you all for presenting. We're going to now use the rest of the time of the meeting for your questions and feedback. So you can raise hands using the reaction if you're online. And if you're in person, you can go ahead and raise your hand and we are going to come to you. And I see your hand there, so thank you. So let's start with Emma, and then we're going to come to the question in the room right after Emma's. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Emma, you can unmute yourself now.
Hi, my name is Emma Briggs, and I'm a resident over on 4th. I have not heard any information about what age group this temporary shelter will have in it, but I did want to point out that as of the 21-22 school year, there were over 2,000 homeless students in Washington County, and so I appreciate that we're getting more resources for them and their families. Even if no minors will be at this site, it at least is a step in the right direction in making sure that the kiddos in our district and their families are getting the support they need. I would also like to point out that I frequently shop at Winco, and so based on my observations, the neighborhood around there was actually improved after the pods came up. Probably because of the amount of staffing, resources, facilities that were available to our homeless population. And so this might actually be a good thing for our neighborhood. And I was, to be honest, a little disappointed that this is only a temporary site. I would like to see a permanent site, at least in our school district, to make sure we have this support in the community.
Thank you, Emma. I'm going to give our translators just a moment to be able to share and communicate to folks who need the interpretation of your question into Spanish, and then we'll respond to your question. Thank you. All right, I think we're mostly caught up. I'd like to maybe bring in the few things on the comment, the age range for these pods. Maybe Jesse could speak to the programming. And then I know that there was also a comment specifically about homeless youth and services related to that. So maybe Jess, if you're available to speak a little bit as to additional programs that can access in our county. Thank you.
Hi, thanks, Emma, for your question. This is going to be a shelter that is targeted at adult individuals, and it is part of Washington County's response system that we're building, a sheltering system to meet all the needs of the community, right? So this is one shelter that is going to be targeted at adult individuals, yes, but it is fitting into a larger system that we're building that contains shelters that are targeted at families as well. So Central Cultural is part of that system that exists right now. Family Promise has purchased a hotel in the Tigard area that has 40 units for families. And again, we're building a system not only of diverse types of shelter like pod villages, motels, congregate shelter, but that meets the diverse needs of families, adult individuals, transitional aged youth as well. So yeah, we're building programming that addresses lots of needs. This will specifically address the needs of adult individuals, as that is the biggest current gap in services in Washington County.
Any follow-ups, Emma, to any other parts of your question? We do have a smaller audience, so we do want to make sure we're being responsive.
No, I appreciate the response, and I mainly wanted to make sure that there was one person who is telling you guys that I'm glad that you're in my backyard or coming into the area and providing these services.
Well, thank you. Really appreciate the support of all the work that Jeremy and Open Door and many folks that have been doing outreach in that area in the city of Hillsborough. Been doing a tremendous job. So thanks for that feedback. I see a hand in the room. Go ahead with your question, and we can hear your audio, but just go ahead and speak right into the microphone, and we'll try to make sure everybody understands your question. So thank you.
Yes, my name is Ty as well, and I live in the area. And I actually have a couple questions. One of the questions was out Highway 47. Open Door was helping the people by putting dumpsters and wash stations and that in the area for the people to wash and use the bathroom. And so they were kind of organizing it and allowing the people to camp. But in return, we have a lot of friends in the area that was, they were being robbed. Their houses were being knocked on in the middle of the night. They were being harassed. There was a death there at the homeless area. There was a lady being held against her will. And I'm curious, how are you going to, and soon as those people left Highway 47, all that cleaned up. And the people no longer have a fund. But now the homeless people are no longer there. They're gone. You have moved them and taken them somewhere else. And what is going to guarantee us that we're going to be safe and we're going to have our families taken care of? And then another question is, they tried this in California and it's not working. So what makes you think that it's going to work here? And another question is that you don't provide drug checks, you don't provide any sexual abuse, you don't provide any type of background check, and then you're allowing these people that you know nothing about at all to move into our communities. And what is really going to guarantee us then again that our safety is taken care of and our kids are taken care of when it wasn't taken care of on Highway 47? So why is it going to be taken care of now?
Thank you, Ty. Excellent. And I have your 3 questions. If we could pause there on those 3
questions. Thank you.
We can come right back to you. Okay, thanks, Ty. Great name too. Thank you for being here with us today. And I did get a chance to meet you at the school the other day as well. So thanks for coming to this meeting. So I have 3 questions and I'm going to see if I captured them. The first is specifically the support for Highway 47 neighbors and residents that were living in that area outdoors who are experiencing homelessness. How are we providing resources to them right now? And then the second question is, what are we doing to ensure safety for residents and neighbors all throughout the community? So let's talk specifically about those 2 questions first, and then let's come back to the next few questions that Ty had. And I know that we do have our resource officer from the Washington County Sheriff's Office available, and then also Jess Larson, you're also available here to maybe speak to our program needs, so our offerings for folks that were at the Highway 47.
Thank you, Ty, and thank you, Ty, in the library. I appreciate the question. I'll respond to a portion of the question and then look to my colleagues here to respond to the rest. One thing that I think is important and sometimes hard to imagine or fully comprehend is that the experience of the campers who were at Highway 47 for more than, I think, 2 years is something very, very different than what we are describing and meeting about today. So in our work, we think of the experience that happened at Highway 47 as the result of not having places for people to go who would otherwise seek shelter. And so many folks lived in the woods or camped informally on their own regard. There was no organized program there with staff capacity, with showers, with case managers, with 24/7 security. That was an informal camping situation that emerged by the will of the people who were staying there. And now, through a variety of responses that the county has helped to coordinate, that camp has closed, and our outreach teams have worked with all of the folks who were there to give them access to various shelter programs. So some folks are in shelters, some folks actually have already moved into housing, and other folks may have just chosen to go somewhere else, but the camp is closed. And we have reached out to all of those folks and offered access to our programs if they wanted it. What we're talking about at the Cornelius location is something very different, where there will be 24/7, 7 days a week. You will have staff on site around the vicinity of the property, checking in with, you know, the neighborhood situation as much as they are working with the individuals in the program to help those folks get to where they need to go for stable housing. Also, everybody staying will have a designated pod structure that is their temporary home where they can keep their belongings and sleep safely. And the entire property will be managed to ensure for cleanliness, conduct, you know, that people are behaving appropriately and that the needs of the individuals are met. So it's going to look and feel 180 degrees different than what Highway 47 looked and felt like.
Thank you. I would like to just speak, bring in Amy to just talk about community safety. I know that there was a question specifically about just neighbors and neighborhood safety.
Hi, Ty. I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I'm juggling two different conversations, so I apologize about that.
And so the question was, what is the ongoing safety, neighborhood safety work that is helping support the residents in the Cornelius area?
That's not what I asked was, if on Highway 47, if those same people are in Highway 47 and you have them and you got them help, and now you're bringing them over to our area, they were thievery in that area, what's going to make them not be thieves in our area? And what is going to guarantee us our safety for our children and our families? That's what we're asking. That we want safety for our families and our kids. And there's no background checks, there's no drug checks, there's no sexual checks, there's no nothing check. Nothing is being done. So what is going to be?
Thank you. I think we understand your question online. So I do think that's a two-part answer. If you could speak to both the programmatic response from John over at Open Door for ensuring safety, as well as the community response. Thank you, from Amy.
Sorry, just real quick. Did you want me to speak now, or was it Amy?
You can go ahead, John.
Okay. So from our side, what we found with our residents that came over to the pods on next to Winco is that as they came into the program, we provided them what they needed. And so they didn't have to go out and steal because they didn't need to steal. Part of the problem is that when you're out and you're homeless and you have nowhere else to go and you have no things, then you lash out and you try to get the things that you need, and you do it in ways that aren't healthy for the community. But as we enter into the pods, where it's going to be a facility that is run and managed, we have things there for them. We're providing them with their needs. We're providing a lot of the things that they want even sometimes. And so they're not going to have the need to go out and steal. Many of the people in our pods actually really loved living there and they don't want to be exited. And because of that, they follow along with the rules and policies and procedures that we have in place and all the regulations, because they don't want to be exited from this program. They want to be in the pods. They want to feel like they're somewhere safe. From our point of view, the friends and guests that we had at that location, they did their best to be well behaved and follow the rules for the most part to a T. And when they didn't follow those rules, there were on a case by case situation and dependent on the severity of the rules that were broken, they were held accountable for that. And so that's the dual factor for us, is that we're going to have an expectation that they're going to follow these rules. And if they are not following these rules, then they'll be held accountable for that, and for any breaking with those rules. And then we're going to be providing them with the things that they need so that when they go to the store, they're not needing to steal. So they're not going to risk getting kicked out of the area just to get something that we can help provide to them. So I would say that those are the areas that would highlight your concerns and the things that we on our side at least do to try and make sure that our residents are taken care of and that they're not needing to follow down those paths that are going to lead them to being exited or potentially jail time.
Great, thank you so much, John. And is there anything else to add from the rest of the team? Okay, I do know that we are coming near the end of the meeting. I just wanted to check if it's okay. We go over by about 5 minutes so we can answer other questions. I do see a hand in the room. Would you like to go ahead and request the microphone, and we would like to get to your comment or question.
Thank you for being here. My name is Dave Moss. I live over on 20th and Alpine, so I'm a little ways away, but not totally away. Just wondering, I've heard that this program is a limited duration. I'm wondering what you can say about that. Also, will the city be brought into this program as far as information goes? The other day I walked to the city and asked them just for basic information, and I was given nothing, and I was given a phone number, which is better than nothing, but I felt like the city was out of the loop. Can you address that, please? Those two areas.
Great, thanks for the question, David. If you could restate your first question. I know that what I captured was that it was related to the development of the site. You said something along the lines of creation, but if you could just repeat it one more time right into the microphone, and then we'll get to your second question, which is
Sure.
the city's active
Duration program is, I've heard it's a limited duration. I'm wondering if that's true, and if you can address that.
Okay, great. So the question is this a limited duration program? But let me just see who can respond to that. Maybe Jeremy, if you have a quick response to just, is this a limited duration program?
Thank you, Ty. So the Safe Rest Village that will be in Cornelius is under a limited duration of 2 years from the time that it opens. We do have a long-term planning, and I'm just putting this out there, and we'll probably have a lot more communication and information that will come out as we work towards the long-term plans for the site. One of the things that Emma had mentioned is having an organization that's a staple in the community to help with different services. And that's what we're looking towards for a long-term solution, is to create a community housing resource center, access center for not just folks that are houseless, but also folks that are, because Open Door is a holistic housing organization. We help with first-time homebuyer education. We work with all of Washington County in foreclosure prevention. We help many folks with mortgage payment assistance, as well as negotiating new terms on loans. We do a lot of lending programs, as well as the list of many services that we do for supportive housing services, everything from our outreach teams to shelter programs, case management, rapid rehousing, as well as our workforce development program, where we take folks with lived experience and help them to gain employment experience through our workforce teams. So to answer, sorry, it's a long answer to your question, but I just want to go over some of the details of this. Is the shelter at the site is limited duration, but we do have long-term plans for community resource center.
Thank you. And to the second part of the question about the city's involvement and participation in the Safe Rest Village at Cornelius, and how to provide information generally about the program, and that is my understanding of your question. But Dave, I'd like to just see if we did capture that second question correctly.
And I was wondering if the city of Cornelius would be brought into the loop as far as information goes with local people can go to the city, say, you don't want to go to the county, but go to the city and say, what's going on, and then you update individual what's going on.
And I'm capturing, so how are we informing the Cornelius city and community? Jess, would you be willing to go ahead and give this first part of the question, and we'll come back to David if you do want to remain alive to respond to any parts we missed. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Yes, we do work to keep our city partners informed about this project. The city of Cornelius has a smaller staff capacity because it's a small team, but we work to inform the city manager, also the is it called like a buildings inspector? I'm forgetting the name of the person's position that we're working with around the like permitting and planning for the project, and then also the local law enforcement team. So there are many ways in which we're coordinating and communicating with the staff at the city of Cornelius to keep them informed with both the engagement and the community information process that we've been going through, and also planning for the upcoming project. This one thing that's important to know is that there is state legislation that allows for the location of shelters to happen according to that state legislation, and not requiring land use review at the local level, or in fact, not allowing for much land use review at the local level when creating shelter programs. So the city did go through that process when Open Door submitted a permit request to the city, and they reviewed it according to the very limited allowance that they can. The project has proceeded since then. And again, we do stay in close communication, but the city frankly has a limited role that they are allowed to play in the creation of the shelter program. And the county has a really big role in funding the program and the creation of shelter projects. So that might be why you're seeing the Washington County staff represented in partnership with Open Door more so than the city of Cornelius staff. Though we do want to assure you, we communicate and coordinate with our colleagues in the city of Cornelius.
Thank you. We are wrapping the meeting up. I think we have one more hand in the room. And so I want to get to that, but we have time for one more question. And then after that, we did want to get to the answer to a question in the chat just about success stories. So let's go to the room with this last question, and then I'll bring in, answer the chat question, and then we'll wrap up. So go ahead.
Success story, is that to me, success stories about the Hillsborough location?
Yeah, why don't you hold on, Jeremy, while we go to the room.
Got it.
Thanks.
Sorry about that.
Ty, were you hearing the question here in the room?
If you could repeat the question in the room, thank you.
Yes, I was wondering why there was no criminal, no background checks, and no drug checks, and no mental health checks on these people that basically that are coming and going to be housed around our families. How come there's no checks on them before you do all this work on them? We spend all this money on them.
And thank you for the question. I know that question was answered earlier in the presentation, but I do thank you, Ty, for the presentation or the question. I want to come over to Jeremy. If you can just give us maybe one success story from the previous work that you've done at the Hillsborough shelter site. I know folks in the chat were curious of any of those success stories. And then I'll come over to Jesse and we'll wrap up for the meeting. Thank you.
Sure. As I mentioned, earlier in the presentation, is that this is a shelter program, but just as much as it's a shelter program, it's a very strategic housing program that's part of a bigger system of care. And so the main success of having folks come into the Cornelius Safe Rest Village, or formerly the Hillsborough Safe Rest Village, as well as the other shelter programs there in Washington County, is they get connected to a very robust system of care of folks that are specialized in different aspects of helping them navigate their path to housing. And some of that could begin with getting them connected with drug and alcohol addiction services, working with peer support specialists, having access to mental health counseling and behavioral therapy, all while they're also working with a case manager to help them navigate the path towards supportive housing or a housing program. A handful of folks that entered the Hillsborough Safe Rest Village are in their own apartment and they're thriving. Some of them have employment, and I know that because some of them are actually working in our workforce development employment program, where they're going around the community and helping with the encampment management cleanup programs. They go to different TriMet stops and do cleanups. They'll actually be coming to our shelter programs to do cleanups and to do part of the land maintenance and upkeep, like mowing the yard and picking up trash. As mentioned before, where there, the Highway 47 encampment that was kind of informal and kind of stood up by the will of the people. Part of our Open Doors strategy to keep the community safe and clean is that our encampment management cleanup team goes to those encampments and helps provide cleanup services. And those folks that had started in those types of environments that went into shelter, then got access to case management, are now part of that employment team, as well as other folks that don't have lived experience. But that's just the importance of, it's a full circle of a system of care of really helping people have a place to create a foundation so that one day they can be independent, self-sufficient, and be proud of where they are in their walk of life. So I think I kind of we have a lot of success stories, and I just kind of want to generalize that there's too many to talk about, but these programs are very much working, because it was mentioned that this has been done in California. I can't speak to California, can't really speak to even Multnomah County, but I can speak to Washington County. What Washington County is doing is different, and it's being seen that it's different, and it is working. It's a very powerful, robust system that's very solution focused, and we're seeing a lot of successes.
Well, thank you, Jeremy. And thank you everyone who joined us today to participate. I'm going to turn over to Jesse to just talk about our next steps for community engagement and the neighborhood plan. Thanks.
Hey everyone, I just want to take the time to reiterate, I don't know, Vara, if you could put the slide up that has the website information on it, that would be great. I just want to remind everybody that the neighborhood plan is going to be up on the county website for a week to provide additional feedback or questions, anything that you didn't get to today, please feel free to take the time to submit it on the website. We will also post the recording of this meeting for anybody who was unable to make it today. And then we will continue to reach out to you all as the construction unfolds and let the neighborhood know of the timeline and opening date for the shelter. And that's all that we have for you all today. I just want to thank you all for your time, especially taking the time in the middle of your day to be here.